Member for North Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to contribute to the Equality Legislation Amendment, LGBTIQA plus Bill 2023. This legislation has been a long time in the making, with the member for Sydney flagging his desire to undertake these reforms for a number of years. But regardless of the length of time that we've had to consider these issues, social policy matters when they come before this Parliament are often challenging for members to decide how to vote on. For me, the decision to support this bill is an easy one, but the need to vote against the rest of my colleagues in the Liberal Party is a very hard one. I've been a member of the Liberal Party for the majority of my adult life. When I came into this place, I did so with the support of many, many hundreds of Liberals who stood beside me in my election. But I was actually elected to this place by the tens of thousands of members of my community of North Shore, and I made the promise to them that I would always put my community first. I'm a Liberal with strong Liberal values, and in my vote on this bill today, I can comfortably reconcile the values of my community and my Liberal values. This week actually marks 80 years since the Liberal Party of Australia was founded, and our party has a very proud record not only of driving Australia's economic progress, but also its social progress. The founder of our party, the great Sir Robert Menzies, said in naming us the Liberal Party that, and I quote, "We took the name Liberal because we were determined to be a progressive party, willing to make experiments, in no sense reactionary, but believing in the individual, his rights and his enterprise." Now, in 2024, Menzies may have used some different pronouns, but the spirit remains the same. The decision to support this bill in its amended form, for me, is a fundamental question in the great tradition of liberalism. John Stuart Mill defined this as harm principle as a central tenet of liberal philosophy. Liberalism is, at its core, a test of how and when government should make decisions, with the view that personal liberty is paramount and should only be restricted through the imposition of government intervention when there is a significant threat or actual harm to somebody. This bill will not harm any person in New South Wales. In fact, as you've heard many times, this bill will affect very few people across New South Wales. But for those that it does affect, it will respond to and seek to rectify great harms that they experience. This is the message that I have heard loud and clear from my community and from those affected during my time on the committee inquiry into this bill. Most of the decisions we make in this Parliament are for the many, and most of our votes are for things that we have a personal knowledge or experience of. Today's vote is about a minority, and a minority with which I have no personal experience. I'm not lesbian, gay, bi or trans. I was not born through surrogacy, nor did I use surrogacy to birth my own babies. I'm not a sex worker, I'm not living with HIV. The only people affected by this bill are the people it seeks to protect. There are those who will argue that there is a slippery slope or a moral hazard to protect the majority from the outcomes of this bill. But those claims do not ring true. Allowing an individual to change their sex on their birth certificate is deeply personal and impactful to that person, but to no one else. Those who claim it will create risk for women are fear-mongering. Women are too often unsafe in our society and even more so in our own homes. But in all my life as a woman, I've never been asked to show my birth certificate to enter a bathroom or to enter a sports change room. And I have also stood shoulder to shoulder and fought for women's rights throughout my life. Wherever individuals threaten, intimidate or harm others, including in places like bathrooms and change rooms, there are existing laws that work to prevent and, if necessary, punish this horrific behaviour. This brings me to the detail of the bill. Our society grapples with how to enshrine our fundamental Australian values of individual rights, of human rights and freedom when it comes to policy settings for transgender people. I recognise that this is a complex policy area, but what is even more complex is the decision that any individual, with the support of their family and medical practitioners, feels that they need to make to change their gender. As a Liberal, I do not believe that I have a say in anyone else's gender, and as a society we have enshrined that. Should we require an individual, as we do today in New South Wales, to undertake major life-altering surgery in order to change their birth certificate? As a Liberal, I say that medical decisions are a matter only for the individual with informed medical advice. This chamber should not be imposing medical requirements on any person. It's also an inconsistent approach to identity documents. Individuals have been able to change their sex on their passport for over a decade without requiring surgical changes. These passport guidelines commenced in 2013 and they operated unchanged throughout both the Abbott Liberal and Morrison Liberal governments. And this bill will only bring New South Wales ID documents in line with every other jurisdiction in Australia. There is a simple and compassionate reason for this change. Everyone deserves to be recognised for who they are. This bill will simplify the process for transgender individuals to update their gender on official documents rather than requiring individuals to undergo major surgery. It's a matter of dignity, autonomy and individual rights. I want to share the story of Bodhi Boulay, who sadly passed away earlier this year from an unknown genetic degenerative condition. After years of being known as a tomboy, Bodhi transitioned to male in 2020 and underwent hormone treatment and a double mastectomy. His name was changed on his birth certificate, but not his gender, meaning his death certificate will also not reflect his gender. It was Bodhi's dying wish that his gender, his identity, be recognised on his birth certificate. I want to acknowledge Bodhi's mother, Heike, who I think is here with us in the chamber today. I was able to meet with her this morning and I want to thank her for her advocacy on behalf of Bodhi and for every other trans person. No one should have to live through what he's lived through and what she's living through. Bodhi's story is a tragic reminder that for trans and gender diverse people, their birth certificate is much more than a simple piece of paper, but it's about their right to exist and be seen for who they are. Hopefully today we can ensure that Bodhi's story isn't repeated across our state in the future. As a member of this Parliament's Community Services Committee, we undertook an inquiry into this bill and we heard from a range of stakeholders and organisations and individuals. We heard their stories and their lived experience and why they believe that this bill would be a positive force for good in communities across New South Wales. In considering this bill, both as a private member and a member of that inquiry, I've listened to many such stories and I could not do anything but support them. I turn now to the changes on commercial surrogacy. Every child deserves the economic and emotional security that comes with legal recognition of their parents. This bill aims to provide parentage rights for children born in overseas commercial surrogacy arrangements where the court is satisfied that it is in the best interest of the child to make that parentage order. This bill will retain the geographical nexus for offences engaging in commercial surrogacy, and it will only allow a parentage order to be granted through a court process if it is in the best interest of the child. I'd like to share a story from a couple who in 2009 decided they wanted to start a family. Ashley and his husband tried to adopt through a fostering agency in New South Wales, but they were told that it was illegal for a same-sex couple to adopt or foster at the time in New South Wales. They then spent some time exploring co-parenting options and then domestic surrogacy, and they were still unable to start their family this way. This left them with international surrogacy, which they commenced before the changes to the laws in New South Wales. They've shared with me the stress, the concern and the fear that they had navigating this process, all because the law in their home state changed and would not recognise their child as legally theirs. The effect of the ban on commercial surrogacy has been damaging, resulting in children like their child Stella, born through overseas commercial surrogacy, being deprived of security and certainty of legal parentage. As a result, legally only one of Stella's parents is listed on her legal documentation. Her birth certificate has one birth parent and Stella's surrogate listed. Her citizenship application has only one parent listed. In his letter to me, Ashley said, and I quote, "I have sleepless nights worrying about what would happen if I were to die. How would my husband navigate the legal documentation often required of parents when there is no record of him?" The bill maintains the requirement for a surrogacy arrangement to be altruistic, but makes a minimal change to the Surrogacy Act 2010 by enlarging the Supreme Court's residual discretion to depart from this requirement and still make a parentage order if it would be in the best interests of the child. These minimal changes prevent a child being punished for the circumstances in which they were conceived, where a court is convinced that it would be in the best interests of that child to recognise the reality of their family. With the increasing challenges that we see across fertility, we may need to revisit surrogate policy, and I acknowledge that the Act is currently being reviewed. But in this bill, international commercial surrogacy will remain against the law. However, the issue that this bill is addressing is what do we do with the children who are already here and don't have the same legal rights and protections and the same protections for their parents as other children in our community? As a Liberal, I want to see strong families providing safe foundations for our children. Madam Speaker, I seek an extension of time.
The member seeks an extension of time. Is the extension granted?
It is.
Granted.
Thank you, members. I now turn to the provisions of the bill that delete the summary offences that seek to prevent living off the earnings of a sex worker and inducing someone to engage in sex work. Sex work is not the profession all of us would choose, but in New South Wales it is legal, legitimate, regulated, and sex workers have a right to determine how they work and how they spend their income, just like you and I. I want to share Giselle's story. For 3 years, she supported her life partner, his mother, and their 2 children with her earnings as a sex worker, a story that many of us can relate to, probably just with a different source of income. Giselle's partner was struggling financially and his business was devastated due to COVID. His mother was living overseas and unable to work, and she needed financial support. As Giselle was able to work and earn a legitimate living through sex work, she was able to support the 5 of them through a very difficult time. Paying for 2 mortgages, insurance, tax, medical bills, food, clothing, and the other necessities of life, her job kept them afloat. And without outside assistance, she tells me that this is something that she should be able to be proud of, not something that should be criminalised. We should be supporting women and their agency to choose what they want to do with their bodies, what they want to do with their income, and empowering women to make the right decisions for themselves without the paternalistic judgment about how they go about doing that.
Yeah.
This bill will also make changes when it comes to addressing those with HIV in this state. Over many decades, education campaigns have significantly reduced the stigma of HIV and AIDS. However, misconceptions and prejudices against those living with HIV still linger. This bill will update terminology to replace terms such as HIV infection and suffering with AIDS to living with HIV/AIDS, which is an important change for those individuals. This bill also addresses challenges regarding domestic violence, and we know that everyone deserves to live safely and free from violence. So this bill will provide equal protection to members of the LGBTIQA+ community by ensuring that crimes motivated by hatred or prejudice towards transgender or intersex people are treated in the same way as hate crimes towards people of a particular religion, race or ethnic origin, language, sexual orientation, age or disability. Too often LGBTIQA+ people in our communities are threatened to be outed or to have their personal information disclosed without consent. This bill ensures that threats to a person's sexual orientation, gender history, HIV status, variations of sex characteristic or sex work are a potential form of violence for the purpose of making an apprehended violence order or apprehended personal violence order. The recent tragedy that saw Jessie Baird and Luke Davies lose their lives is a timely reminder that domestic violence happens in all communities across New South Wales, and there are also alarming statistics of domestic violence in same-sex relationships and transgender relationships. In considering the components of the bill, I want to acknowledge and recognise the contribution of the member for Sydney, Alex Greenwich, who has worked incredibly hard to bring these issues for these minority interests to this Parliament to ensure that we vote on these issues and vote for these individuals. And I know he would like to see these changes go a lot further, and knowing the member for Sydney, he will work to ensure that they do. In closing, I want to acknowledge the breadth of views on this bill and know that there will be those who are disappointed in my decision, but I remain confident that my conscience is in line with my community. In previous debates in this place on matters of social conscience, I've referred to my Christian upbringing and that of my grandparents. I particularly welcome the comments from the Newcastle Diocese of the Anglican Church, where I was born and raised, so we can blame them, and in particular the comments of strong support from the Anglican Bishop Peter Stewart. The Christianity with which I was raised was founded in compassion and non-judgment, and those are the values with which I choose to live my life and bring in my approach as a member of this Parliament. I recognise that the Liberal Party will vote against this bill. I say to those who vote Liberal across New South Wales that this is the only party in this Parliament where I could take this step and remain part of the team. Our philosophy as a party ensures that I can vote with my conscience. I thank my Liberal colleagues in this place for demonstrating their profound respect and kindness to me as I make this decision. My liberalism naturally extends to respecting each of their right to disagree with me on this bill. I once again thank my community for entrusting me with this decision, now on 3 occasions with their votes. That's a precious commodity which is hard fought for around the world. I know this bill won't affect most of you. Our community is compassionate, respectful, and stands up for people's rights. So thank you to those who have reached out over the last 24 hours in particular. I'm proud to be your MP too. I know that I'm working in your name and in your voice. I commend the bill to the House.